What's up? It's Robert Fitton, and today I want to talk about some albums and some album concepts that really should have just been aborted. Let's get right to it. Started off with Styx and their 1983 album, Kilroy Was Here. Not too controversial of a choice, I don't think. I think we can all pretty much agree the world would be a better place without this album, pretty much universally panned. It was supposed to be this big concept piece from Styx. And yeah, the whole thing about, the concept album in 1983 really wasn't working anymore. We had really gone more to 3D movies at that point. But yeah, they had this whole theatrical thing about, I don't know, these overlords coming and they want to kill rock and roll is outlawed and, come on. And I thought we'd been making music here for professionally for 10 years at this point. So I don't know about killer government banned rock and roll. The whole thing seemed like it was made for 8-year-olds. Audiences apparently were not into it. They went on this tour. It started out this bombastic theatrical thing, and by the end of the tour, they had just stripped it down and were just playing the songs. Mr. Roboto was cool though? Nah, no it wasn't. And neither was Don't Let It End. It's the kind of album that you put on an older Styx album, like Paradise Theater, and you're like, wow, these guys were awful the whole time. Yeah, I mean, I like Come Sail Away. I like the Tommy Shaw songs. Stay Away from Kilroy Was Here. Yeah, another one that probably shouldn't have seen the light of day. The whole idea that the Clash can continue without Mick Jones, and put out Cut the Crap. If you're not familiar with this Clash release, it's because I think they want to sweep it under the rug. It's not on any of their compilations, including the big box sets. I think there's a song in here called This Is England that made it on one thing, one time. Not a very good song. It's this whole heartfelt, definitely doesn't sound like what you'd expect out of the Clash. It starts off with the whole thing is drum machines, first of all, what? And then it starts off with this whole just really noisy thing with this constant woman talking in your left channel the whole time, and just bombastic, just over the top. And this was supposed to be the stripped down, let's get back to the basics of punk rock. We went a little overboard with the production on Combat Rock. We're going to strip it back now. We got Mick Jones out of here and his world music, influences. We're just going to be bam punk rock. And then they come out with Cut the Crap. Probably should have never happened. The Clash's legacy would be intact. They wouldn't have to be constantly acting like this thing never happened, which, by the way, it just proves that the Clash, once again, very ahead of their time, because the whole, the way that we treat reality now, if we don't like something that happened, we just pretend it didn't happen. They were doing that way back when. So hats off to the Clash for, once again, being ahead of their time, just kind of pretending that Cut the Crap never even existed. Okay, you know what? I did a video about the whole US Festival in 1983, where I pitted they pitted the Clash against Van Halen. They had this huge rivalry going on. Everybody was picking sides. I have a whole video about it. It has tons of views for some reason. So maybe we should do the Clash versus Van Halen again. Cut the Crap, take it on Van Halen 3. Who do you think would win that? Here's another one that should have just not happened. You'd have a much better discography when you're looking down Van Halen if you didn't have to be reminded that they did that Gary Cherone album. Gary Cherone from Extreme coming in for Van Halen 3. Big songs like Without You was the first single. I remember being in radio. I was in rock radio when that was released, and I remember getting the CD single with Without You on it, and just the whole station, everybody was it was one of those things. We were all in the office. We all had the CD player. It was playing, and we got 5 or 6 of us hearing the Van Halen for the first time, and we all just had the same look on our face, what is this? This song is just so completely all over the place, and just it starts off doing a groove, and that'll last for I don't know, 20 seconds, and then they'll switch to something else, and then the lyrics are all over it's really, really a good way of representing the whole album. I remember we played some other tracks off here, Fire in the Hole, and maybe Year to the Day. Again, this is not even on vinyl still, I don't think. Last time I checked, this was not even a vinyl release. So, is Cut the Crap on vinyl? What do you think? Cut the Crap or Van Halen 3? Another album that should have just been aborted way early on. As far as good ideas, That's right up there with the Lost Prophets petting zoo. Live Aid. Speaking of videos, I did a video about We Are the World. So I was doing I was watching like We Are the World and Live Aid and Hearing Aid and all those mid '80s kind of like benefit concerts and things like that. How about Led Zeppelin getting together and playing Live Aid with Phil Collins on the drums? Now, he was only one drummer because they wanted to really respect John Bonham. And they had two drummers. One of them, Phil Collins, who's just flying all, transatlantic flights, trying to do both of the U.S. and the U.K. Live Aid concerts, coming and playing drums for Led Zeppelin when he hadn't really even rehearsed at all. I don't know why they picked Phil Collins. It seems like a completely different drumming style than John Bonham's, but no one thinks it went well, blaming it on technical difficulties to begin with, and now years later everybody's like, yeah, it wasn't a good idea. Jimmy Page blames Phil Collins. Phil Collins blames Jimmy Page. Robert Plant just says, hey, what's what? And yeah, Led Zeppelin, the big reunion. They played Black Dog, I think. They played Rock and Roll. They played Stairway to Heaven, and it was not good. I think they got Phil Collins probably because of so if you're kind of like, why would they? Phil Collins is kind of like Genesis. That's probably what did it, because that song was about 3 years old at the point in the air tonight. But in 1985, it came back big time with Miami Vice. So it was a big song again in '85. They probably remembered, oh yeah, let's get that guy to play drums for us. Yeah. I remember that Led Zeppelin reunited again for the Atlantic Records anniversary, and instead of like Rock and Roll or Stairway to Heaven, they did Wearing and Tearing. Again, it's like, man, you guys are just really not giving the fans what they want, are you? Instead of just albums, let's talk about some trends or some concepts that should have never seen the light of day, should have been aborted early on. The loudness wars. Do you know what I'm talking about? This is this brick walling sound that a lot of CDs started having right around the late 90s, and it definitely went on into the 2000s. It's my opinion that this is why a lot of people don't like digital, because they're hearing these later digital CD releases that are completely overdriven. Like I said, if you look at the wave file, instead of seeing a bunch of spikes where the drums or where the beats and everything are, you just see a brick, because everything is just pushed way up. It's hard to distinguish one instrument from another. It just starts to sound like noise, but it was loud when you played it. When you had a CD changer and you had 5 CDs in it, this CD would be the loudest. The earliest examples I can remember, again, being in radio, where I'm actually looking at levels playing, Aerosmith's Get a Grip and Metallica's Load. These were the two, especially this Load one, where it was just like you turn it on and the levels would just be boop, and they would just stay there like this. Everything's so completely overdriven. Metallica would come out with another album much later on called Death Magnetic, where they would release it on CD and on a video game. And the video game version sounded a million times better because they didn't use that technology that they do with the CD compression. And people started noticing it, and that's when the whole vinyl resurgence started coming back. The vinyl was starting to get pressed from original masters where they wouldn't do that CD mastering on it, so they sounded great. Everybody's like, damn, records sound better than CDs. Well, a lot of that was because the CD sounded so awful with that brick walling. And like I said, earliest examples I can remember, Get a Grip from Aerosmith and Load from Metallica. And I know those are a few years apart, but that's kind of like the earliest one, and then that's Metallica Load is where it just reached its ridiculousness, and it just stayed there for like 10 years with the CD mastering. Hey, let's start off a band called Creed. Should have never happened. That thing with the Doors a few years back where they went and like did all the songs and put all these effects on them and new guitar like licks and things like that. Jim Morrison laughing and just redid all the songs, remixed all of them. And then put the original ones out of print. That should have never happened. Those were awful. They got all over the radio, was playing them, and you'd hear LA Woman with this different kind of stuff going on, and it was just like, that's not, I want to hear what I want, the Doors, the way I remember them. And so I looked, I don't think any of those made it to vinyl. So another great cheer for vinyl there. You don't have to put up with those ridiculous Doors remixes that came out on CD. And they don't say it anywhere on there either. They don't say that these are new remixes. You just kind of have to know. You know what? Best bet. Just go ahead and stick with the original vinyl of the Doors. That way you get the original mixes. You get everything as it was intended. And let's face it, unless you're going to do like the post Jim Morrison reads poems over 70s disco music, there's really only 5. So, you know, pretty easy little get there from the Doors. Just stick with the original vinyl. I mentioned this one in another video. I'll just be real quick about this. The ZZ Top 6-pack that came out in 1987. I called it the Fuck Frank mixes because they basically took the drummer out and replaced him with a bunch of drum machines. Frank Zappa did the same thing in the 80s and all that kind of stuff. Ridiculous. I do not like remixed CDs, and again, when they did that, this was all that was available. The vinyl was out of print, and the only way you could get the albums were on these awful CDs, and then you'd hear the songs on the radio that way. ZZ Top Greatest Hits still has the version of Tush, and what's the other one? LaGrange, and that ridiculous. Again, with the drums no longer sound like tight tom-toms and like real Texas, you know, down-home boogie drumming of Frank Beard. Now everything sounds like, because that's how we want to hear 1975 ZZ Top. No thank you to the ZZ Top 6-pack and all those early releases. Should have never happened. Something else that should have never happened. Kiss, smashes, thrashes, and hits. You're going to take all the Kiss hits and remix them to these weird, like, hollow-sounding 80s remixes. You're going to take Rock and Roll All Night and rearrange it so that the verses are all up front, and then it just repeats, I want to rock and roll all night and party every day, over and over and over again. Did you notice that on Smashes and Thrashes and Hits? They moved the second verse earlier and then put the repeating the chorus here, so the chorus just repeats on and on. It's awful. You're going to take Peter Criss out of Beth? You don't do that to the Catman. What? Speaking of things that should have been aborted, the Kiss solo albums. But yeah, Peter Criss sings Beth. That's it. What is Eric Carr doing that? No. He actually apologized to Peter Criss. He apparently came to him in tears and said, man, there was nothing I could do. I had to do it. They made me do it. They made me sing Beth. Awful. Stay away from smashes, thrashes, and hits. And as long as you're still here, right? I still got you? Okay, because this is where we break. Because I'm going to go ahead and say it. Those Beatles remixes shouldn't have happened. I hate the Beatles remixes. I don't like them. They're everywhere. It's like, well, if you don't like them, don't listen to them. But they're everywhere. They show up on the streaming things when you're just ready to hear like a mix, you know, and all of a sudden here comes these Beatles remixes. They're on the radio again. Beatles remix. I love the outtakes. I love the demos. I love hearing how songs are put together and the different, you know, versions and things like that. But we really just did not need the Giles Martin remixes of the White Album and Sgt. Pepper and Abbey Road. I don't believe any of them lended anything to the originals. It's just more out there on the market, more to confuse people. Yeah, I get it. People have said things like, well, they're making music for a younger generation to get involved. Let me tell you something about that. Okay, first of all, that's not giving very much credit to young people. Okay, second of all, I discovered the Beatles in 1981 when I was 8 or 9 years old because the cartoon came back on TV. Because I was listening to all kinds of music, but the Beatles were never on those super hits of the 60s compilations because of licensing. And they were never at yard sales, which is where I got a lot of my 45s and stuff when I was that age, because people weren't selling Beatles stuff. They were selling the other stuff. And so I was late to the Beatles, but it was 9 years old. And I listened to the Beatles, and I fell in love with them, even though I'd already heard Kiss. I'd already heard Steve Miller Band. I'd already heard, you know, 70s rock or whatever. And they didn't have to be remixed. They didn't have to be like put in like some early 80s like synthesizers and 808 drums and smack back like, you know, percussion. They didn't have to do all that. They were the exact same way they sounded in the 60s, and I loved it. And it sounded like the 60s. It didn't sound like current times. It was one of the great things about it. I discovered Led Zeppelin and really got into Led Zeppelin in 1987 or 88 when I was a freshman in high school. The songs were, you know, 15 years old at that point or more. They still sounded like 1971. They still sounded like 1973. They didn't have to put a bunch of, mixing and records and rapping or whatever was going on in 1988 to make me like Led Zeppelin. I liked it the way it sounded. It was fine with me, even though I was a teenager. I don't believe that thing where you have to change and make music and update it and remix it and everything so that young people can digest it, because they just don't, they won't, you put it in front of them and they won't eat it otherwise. I mean, come on. That is not giving any credit to young people, number one. And number two, I don't buy that at all. It's a cash grab. It's just something to get out product from the Beatles and never should have happened. Let It Be Naked is the only one because it's the one where it was put back how it was originally intended. Love Let It Be Naked, not so much the 2012 and 15 and 19 whatever remixes. Huge deluxe box sets. Can we stop with the ones that shouldn't have even happened? People, we are on Black Sabbath technical ecstasy at this point. With a super deluxe box set coming with like 5 albums, all these retakes and demos and whatever of technical ecstasy music from Black Sabbath. Now, if you're going, yeah, cool, I got it. I got to have the click. What I want you to do now, if you're old enough, I want you to go back in time in your mindset if you can. I want you to try to think like it's 2003. Try to think like it's 1996 if you can. Put your mind there. Now think, would I go out and buy a bunch of outtakes from Black Sabbath technical ecstasy? You probably wouldn't. You probably wouldn't. It's enough with the super. I get it if it's a huge album and it's got a lot of history and it's, the technical ecstasy is what we're doing at this point now. And that Never Say Die's coming and we're going to redo, what's the tire or whatever. We're time to stop. How about bands doing ridiculous, ironic covers? I guess it doesn't really happen anymore, but the Dead Kennedys already did Rawhide. They already did Viva Las Vegas. It's been done. It's done. We don't need the Boys of Summer. We didn't need Limp Bizkit's version of Faith. We didn't need whoever the hell redid Come On Eileen as some sort of ska song. We didn't need any of that. We didn't need the covers albums where the whole goddamn album is a cover. Do you know a good covers album? It all started with the Standells, the hot ones, where they're covering all the hot hits of the day back in the 60s. Like, all the hot hits. But now they're done by the Standells. So, now they're going to be done right. Yeah, that has led to so many cover albums that just did not need to happen. Guns N' Roses, The Spaghetti Incident. Who listens to this still? Weezer does the 80s, whatever the hell that was. Foo Fighters do the Bee Gees. Enough. Let's cut the cord. Let's cut it off. Let's stop it with the covers album. Country people redoing their own hits. People redone like the Police. Here's a late term one because they actually kind of got it started. The Police's original idea for this album, the singles, Don't Stand So Close, or Every Breath You Take, the singles, was to remake each one of the songs. Now, they remade Don't Stand So Close to Me, slowed it down, made it this really boring kind of weird version. It actually had a video. It was on the radio for a while. And that original plan was to redo all the songs like that until one of the band members was injured and they had to scrap that plan. Thankfully, they did. Should have never happened in the first place. But artists redoing their own stuff. Like I said, a lot of that happened with country. A lot of that happening with oldies. I was so disappointed. I promised myself I wouldn't cry, but K-Tel started doing it. And I thought I could trust K-Tel until this came out. Yeah, K-Tel even started doing those 50s remakes. Back in 1972, a lot of these oldies acts, like, all of them, Jan and Dean, the Skyladder, it didn't matter, all of them, went into this recording studio and got their music republished by a group called Key 7. They were all re-recordings, and that just spawned release after release of re-recordings from the 50s. They all sound awful. Who wants to hear a 50-year-old guy standing there singing, "Hey Little Girl" in a high school sweater, "Can I Walk You Home"? Probably not a lot of people, and if they do, you want to be leery of those people. And you're thinking, yeah, those are 50s people, country people, no integrity at all. Suicidal Tendencies remade their own songs. Actually, this isn't that bad, but still, you want the originals. They did this back in 1993. You had Jeff Lynne remaking stuff. Nowhere on the album does it say it's a remake. I talked about this in another video too, where Jeff Lynne remade all the ELO songs. Yes, Jeff Lynne was the brains behind Electric Light Orchestra, but still you probably want the original hit recordings that you love and know, especially when it doesn't mention that these are re-recordings anywhere on the packaging. You can't even trust Jerry Rafferty. That's kind of where we're living in. You can't even trust Jerry Rafferty on United Artists. Some of these are remakes. So yeah, you can't even trust Jerry Rafferty. And when they do the thing with the oldies, here's another idea that should have never left the boardroom, should have been aborted before it even got out into the world. Rechanneling for stereo. This was big in the 70s. This is why you got to watch out for the Elvis albums and the Chuck Berry albums and The Beach Boys albums even rechanneled for stereo. That's when it sounds like it's echoey coming from like another room because it was originally released in mono, but God forbid somebody listen to something that was in mono in the 70s. So we had to have rechanneled stereo releases. Hank Williams Sr., same way. A lot of the old country from the 50s rechanneled. So watch out for that on the label. Sometimes it says it, sometimes it won't. But then again, if that whole idea would have been aborted, you wouldn't have had to worry about it. And finally, can we stop with, I think we have stopped, but with the live remakes of Footloose for ABC and the Disney version of the Rocky Horror Picture Show or whatever. I'm so tired of what that thing from Footloose. Which Footloose? There's only one Footloose. There's some albums and album concepts, ideas, marketing ploys that should, in my opinion, have been aborted. Yeah, they probably, some of them made a lot of money and whatever. They were cool for cats at the time, but still, let's face it, the world would be a better place without any of the stuff I just showed. I'm Robert Fithen. Thanks for watching. The Clash versus Van Halen. Cut the Crap versus Van Halen 3. Who's the winner there?